Charles, and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
Their screams are the worst. We're more than 100 meters away on the other side of the river, but I can hear Marines dying. Their armored vehicle hit a landmine. It caught fire with 15 men aboard. They scream as they burn alive. The radio chatter is desperate, almost hysterical. Nobody can get to them. There will be no salvation, only a torturous death in the flames. From our position across the river, we hear every agonizing moment and can see their funeral pyre rising over the riverbank. I can do nothing. It is the most helpless, enraging feeling I've ever experienced. I have no way to get across the water to those burning men. It takes forever for the last screams to fade away. And that is an excerpt from a book called Heart for the Fight. And it's written by a guy named Brian Stan. And if you don't know who Brian Stan is, you can Google him. He's a son, a father, a husband. He was the WEC light heavyweight champion of the world. He's a UFC veteran. 11 fights in the UFC with some wins and some losses against some of the best fighters in the world. He's also a veteran of the United States Marine Corps with 2 tours to Iraq as a platoon commander and as a Company XO. And I am honored tonight to actually have Brian with us here as a guest. Mr. Brian Stan, welcome to the show.
I gotta tell you, that's I have not been introduced like that before. That's an excerpt of that book that I could honestly say I haven't laid eyes on. I don't even know how many years. I forget the year we released it. Some powerful writing by my ghostwriter, John Bruning, and that is a tough memory. It's one of those ones that we kind of bury deep down and think about just from time to time. But certainly when you at times where maybe you take things for granted in life, it's good to go back to that moment, and realize that whatever I may be whining about or whatever I think is difficult at the time is a heck of a lot easier than it once was, and I need to be grateful. Get off my butt and go finish.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, you see the explosions take place with IEDs, and the wars that we were involved in were, the main weapon of the enemy was the IED. And even when we made thicker, heavier armored vehicles or like tracked vehicles, when they get hit with an IED, even though it might withstand some of the impact, there's fire start, and it's a nightmare. And this is the nightmare you described right there. And I want to get into that. I want to get into the combat that you experienced. But before we do that, first of all, like the people that listen to this show, not everyone even watches UFC. Not everyone knows about you. So just kind of give a little bit of a background on growing up. Let's take it back to Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Sure. Absolutely. So moved around a lot. I was born in Japan. And around that time when my mom had come back to the States, my father had left. And so grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania. We moved around quite a bit, but got into sports at an early age. And I had a phenomenal mom. And I think not having a dad really affected my sister a lot more than it affected me. But even from an early age, I knew that the military was going to be an option. From the days of being a young kid watching silly movies like Iron Eagle, there was something.
Yeah. You better not call Iron Eagle silly in front of Echo. This guy over here, that's like a classic to him.
Yep.
But for me, there was always something to it that rang as special to me. And what I found is growing up without a dad, you tend to want to impress every male influence you have in your life. So every time I went out for a team, I wanted to be the hardest worker on the team. I'd run through a wall for my coach. And that continued all the way through high school. And then all of a sudden, playing high school football, I started to get recruited by some good schools. And not many people in my family had gone to college. Certainly I had expected to go to college, but never expected to get recruited to go play somewhere. And so that was a different experience for me. I didn't always handle it the best. But when the Naval Academy came knocking, I knew that's where I wanted to go. West Point started recruiting me early as a junior. I took my films, my tapes to the Naval Academy. There was just something about that place, and I wanted to go there. So I decided before I make a decision, let me visit West Point, let me visit the Naval Academy in a 4-day time period. I'll visit both and make my decision. When I went to West Point, one of the football coaches was supposed to meet me there. Never showed. So one of the players took me around campus, showed me some stuff, but it was still beautiful. I mean, greater than any, Scranton's one of the poorest cities in America. It's not nice. So, my uncles, my aunts, and my mom, the thought of me going to the Naval Academy is a big deal. I remember my track coach in high school telling me, Brian, listen, this is a big deal. It's a great opportunity. There's a lot of things in your life that can change by going here. I said, yeah, but I'm getting recruited by some of these Ivy League schools too. He says, it's not the same, and I don't think you're going to fit in. I'm going to be honest with you, Brian. Right. My track coach was a bright guy. So 2 days later, I go to the Naval Academy, and I hand them my tape. Now, they hadn't even started recruiting me yet. But those coaches were so nice to my mom. And by doing that, I was in. They recruited your mom. They recruited my mom. They were so respectful to her. The water was there. It was so pretty. Okay, I'm in. And I had made that decision early, that's where I wanted to go and focused on that. Did some summer school to take some classes to boost my AP courses in high school just to make sure that I didn't have to go to the prep school first. I wanted to go right to the Naval Academy. And so that in a really quick nutshell, football was a vehicle. Along with my academics were good, but having a 3.5 GPA and a 12.10 on your SATs isn't normally going to get you into the Naval Academy. Right. Football was the vehicle that got me there. And I could remember prom night, lifting weights in the weight room with my rented tux in the locker. I was there all by myself. I had the security code. I was one of the only guys who worked all summer long. I was the only white guy where I worked in this tomato plant. And I would work to help pay for the high school I went to because my mom took me out of public schooling, put me in this good high school because I had gotten suspended a couple times in middle school. And it was one of the harder decisions, but one of the best decisions that she made and pushed me towards. Because the teachers at that school, when they saw me having this opportunity, they helped. Hey, let's help Brian get to the Naval Academy, go there to play football, but, really get himself on a great trajectory. And there's not a day I regret it. There were definitely days I couldn't stand being at the Naval Academy, like anybody, hated it. But the friends I made there, the opportunities, and the pathway to the Marine Corps, which still to this day, I don't know if I'll ever be as good at any job as I was at being a